What's going on? So, just to kind of give you a side note, we will be getting into some technical information. You probably won't be able to keep up with the notes for a few configurations. I will give you that complete disclaimer. Just bug me for the slide presentation afterwards. That way y'all got it and you don't have to try to quickly write shit down. We ready to go? Alrighty, cool. So let's talk about WAF bypass, baby. So basically, this is my, if you guys are familiar with what I've been doing, been looking at HTTP2. This is probably going on 2 years now. And really what I'm trying to do is I really want more security researchers looking at HTTP2. There's really just not enough. Everybody's still focusing on traditional HTTP1 or 1.1 attacks. So really, I think my hope and my dream is to drive more awareness and get y'all to start hacking on it with me. So my disclaimer, everything stated in this talk is not to be considered to be considered my opinion and not the official representation of my employer. Some assembly is required, each sold separately. Batteries are not included. Keep out of the reach of small children. And as always, do not test sites that you do not have prior permission to test, because that would be bad. A little bit about me. Who am I? I'm Brett Gravois. I go by Security Panda online. If you need to send me any hate mail, death threats, anything like that, that is my email address. I am an application security enthusiast. I test pens, I break web apps, I make some tasty food, and at this point I'm an owner of a slightly less majestic beard since I had to kind of trim it down before I came out. So moving on, why am I doing this? Basically because I want to raise your awareness, my awareness, and everybody else's awareness of what's going on. Again, to find new WAF bypass techniques, find some old, maybe new vulns. I'm not going to lie, I like money, so, submitting some stuff to bug bounties. It's nice to have a little extra cash to go do stuff. And I like pain and suffering and looking at things that aren't documented. I kind of stole this from Tetler, just stop putting shit on the internet. So basically, what we're going to do, for most of you that aren't familiar, we're going to go over the HTTP2 protocol and, how does it work. So basically today, HTTP was first published in May of 2015 as an update to 1.1. By the end of that year, basically all major browsers have support for HTTP2. It's basically being utilized all across the internet. Sites such as Google, Twitter, Facebook, and perhaps probably even your own company's sites have HTTP2 enabled. And basically that's a list of everything that supports HTTP2. So if you're using any sort of modern web server, you're probably having it enabled. I think a lot of people do kind of ask me, well, I don't have it enabled, and I usually go and check, and they in fact do. So just as a little tidbit. So HTTP2 is binary versus HTTP1 being ASCII. Binary makes the framing much easier. And it helps with compression, and it runs over TLS. And basically, you won't see it over the wire. You have to get used to using the idea of using something like Wireshark or some other packet inspector to see the protocol level of H2. It also has multiplexed streams. A stream is an independent bidirectional sequence of frames exchanged between the client and server within an H2 connection. A single H2 connection can contain multiple concurrent open streams, and the multiplexing the streams means that packages from many streams are mixed over the same connection. And just kind of keep in mind that it's a one-to-one connection, so basically you have one connection from your server, from your browser over to the server. So kind of keep that in mind. You have one connection that's continuous where all the data is constantly flowing over. You don't have an open and closed connection like you would with H1. So keep that in mind for later, okay? Header compression. Basically, HTTPS is a branch, is a branch of Spidey, and the compression were found to be vulnerable. So basically it uses HPAC, which is a header compression for H2, which as the name suggests, it's a compression format especially crafted for H2 headers and is being specified in a separate internet drive. So the new format, together with other countermeasures, should make it harder to exploit the compression, but that's from my last talk. Basically, there's a lot of fun like HPAC bombs and things like that with the compression level. And then the other thing is that HTTP2 uses a server push or a cache push. And basically that means that the server is predicting what your browser is going to be asking for. So when you're asking for page A or resource X, it's also going to say, hey, like most people will ask for resource Y or resource Z, and so it'll actually cache it in the background while you're connecting. And it's something that the client has to be configured to allow to do. So your browser, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, or whatnot, has to be enabled to do that, and that's just kind of what makes it more efficient. So kind of what does the H2 handshake look like? So, traditional HTTP1 handshake is basically you send a GET request from your client to your browser, or from your browser to the server, and then the server turns around and just goes, okay, here's your site, here you go, and it'll give it a response and usually body information data. So just so you know, there's two different types of connections for HTTP2. The first one is an unsecure, which is considered H2C. So what happens is the client makes a request for the HTTP site, doesn't really know what it really wants. It just says, hey, I need this site. And basically what you can see in here in this HTTP request is you see the fourth line down, it adds an upgrade request, which tells it that the browser is supporting H2C. So what that does is that goes ahead and tells the server that the client actually supports that particular protocol. So generally what happens, so if the server does not support H2, you'll see something like the first example where you'll just get the traditional H1 200 OK request. The second one is if it does support H2 and it accepts the upgrade, it will reply with a 101 status code, which is switching protocols. Connection will upgrade, and then it will go ahead and continue to talk over H2C. The interesting part of this is I think that BERT pretty much took this out, so if you're trying to proxy it, you're not going to see it. So that's just kind of an interesting little tidbit there, just so you know. The second connection is over HTTPS, which is the most common connection. The client's going to make the HTTPS request, and it's going to send the list of TLS that it supports with an added level which is called ALPN, which is the application layer protocol negotiation extension, or TLS ALPN. So just quickly, like, hey, how does ALPN work? ALPN is a TLS extension, and it includes the protocol negotiation within the exchange of hello messages. So basically, when your browser is asking to connect to the server, you're going to go ahead and it's going to send a list over of what it can connect with. Usually starting with whatever it's configured. I would hope that you're connecting with the most secure connection, but that's not always the case. So basically, ALPN is able to negotiate this connection and basically is a little bit more efficient than a traditional SSL connection. And so basically it is just only an HTTP2 protocol at this time. It just basically decreases website and load times and encryption as well. So basically it's just a typical, or this is a typical connection. So the client is going to send a hello message over. It's going to tell it that the client is going to tell the server that it supports ALPN, and it'll give it a list of protocols that it supports. The server will go ahead and check that out, see that it does support ALPN extension, It'll check its list of selected protocols to make sure that they can talk, and then it'll go ahead and establish the connection, usually over whatever default that you have specified within the browser. Not always the most secure though. Basically, the next part is the current security landscape. So basically, if you ask your WAF company if HTTP2 is supported, you're really going to kind of get a, well, I guess we support it, or you'll get the answer, we have experimental support, which means we may not, or the other fun answer that you always get from software companies is it's on the roadmap. And what does that mean? I don't know. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, never, whatever. So basically, when you look at security tools, as of right now that I know of, there's only 2 proxies that will record traffic in H2. The first one is Charles Proxy, which is a paid-for product, and the other one is Man-in-the-Middle Proxy, which is a really awesome open-source product. If you're not familiar with it and you're doing web app stuff, it's a lot of fun to play with. And really, DAS tools still do not support HTTP2. And if you have any information contrary to what I'm saying now, please let me know. But this is just on my research and me asking. Most DAS tools do not want to support HTTP2 because then they're going to have to rip out their network stack and rewrite it. And really, there just isn't enough demand for it right now. So, how do I tell that HTTPS or HTTP2 is even running? So basically, what we're going to be using for this, at least, is a little product called NGHTTP2. So it's a proxy product that's available on Linux and Mac. And basically, if you just run the command NGHTTP -NV and then the domain name, it'll go ahead and give you information about the connection. So as you can see, the negotiated protocol is H2. It goes ahead and tells you the frames, the updates, the settings. You'll get a lot of server header information back. You'll see how colorful people name their servers as well. So that's kind of fun. And you just kind of got to make sure, because you'll get 2 different messages. So one of the pitfalls that you get is, if you're going through something like a CDN, my personal favorite, Cloudflare, they're a huge proponent of Nginx, and it will be configured at the proxy level, but that does not always mean that it's going to connect to the server at the same protocol or negotiation. Same thing with SSL certs and whatnot. It's a pretty interesting pitfall. So just got to make sure that it is actually connecting. So with this, you'll see the H2 connection, and then further down in the information, you'll see what you're actually connecting at. So don't be fooled by your browser telling you you're using H2 or whatnot. Not always the case. So basically, let's talk about the bypass. We've got old fat Steven Seagal not putting in much effort, and yet the guy's getting his ass kicked, right? So basically, this is really not a traditional bypass. So generally, when you see somebody talking about WAF bypass, you see people using encoding or other fun methods, usually with cross-site scripting or local file inclusion or something like that, where they're doing some sort of, I'll say, fuckery with whatever request you're sending. You're just kind of changing it and changing it and changing it until somebody's default WAF will finally take the payload that you're giving it, usually after about 3 or 4 tries. So really, if you're looking at, WAF bypass in this sense, this isn't really a WAF bypass per se. Basically, we're just walking around the WAF. So we're not even really going through the WAF. We're just ignoring it and going around it. And so basically, how does this work? You're basically using a proxy or a reverse proxy setting from your attack station in order for this to work. And really, you're just kind of hiding in plain sight. You're not really doing anything. We're not trying to hide. We're not trying to, be stealthy or anything. We're just kind of, I guess say exploiting kind of what's already there and the lack of functionality in current support products. So basically, how does this work? So really what we're going to do is we're going to start out, we're going to install a little product called NG-HTTP2, which includes the NG-HTTP-X product, which is either on Mac or Linux. You're not going to really be able to do this from a Windows station. And NG-HTTP2 is a proxy solution. So we're going to go ahead and download that. We're going to install it. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to create the first of 2 configuration files. So you're going to create a browser to burp configuration for the first instance, and that will convert the HTTP2 request from the browser to an H1 request that will be sent to burp and vice versa. So generally what we're doing is burp does not support H2. So what we're doing is we're using a proxy to go ahead and fool burp into thinking that we're sending H1 connections, but we're actually going to send H2 connections once it leaves burp and goes into the browser and then is passed into the server. So this is the first one. You're going to create a second connection, so we're actually running two different proxies. So the second one is the config file for burp to send information back to the server. So what that's going to do is that's going to take the H1 traffic from burp and go ahead and convert it to an HTTP2 request that will be sent to the server and vice versa. The fourth step is we're going to go ahead and create our own self-signed PEM file and assert .pem file for the config for the proxy. And then we're going to go ahead and fire up 2 different instances of burp, of the proxy. Again, one goes from burp to the server, and the other one is the connection back to the server. And then you go ahead, you configure Firefox to proxy requests via the first NG-HTTP instance, which we picked the port 9080. You're going to configure burp's proxy listener to redirect requests to the listening port of the second instance, which we picked 9090. And then on the project options, connections tab, you're just going to create the instance for it to listen on that particular port. In this example, we used http2.akamai.com to go ahead and just listen to it, which is a known HTTP2 instance. And then you'll go ahead and basically browse to that site, and this particular site, that's what you see. You'll get a picture on both sides if it's configured correctly. So kind of a couple little side notes on this, because we go back to how does HTTP2 work. Remember that it has a single binary connection back to the server. So as you're streaming, you're really only going to be able to test one connection at a time. So if you start spidering off into different subdomains or different servers, it's not gonna work that effectively. Generally, you're looking at one server, one load balancer, one single connection for this to work. But it's been tested. If you get things that are HTTP2 only testing, you want to do a bug bounty or something like that, this is a really awesome method to go ahead and walk around people's WAFs. And even, change protocols, because people don't always know that they're running H2. They're not securing it. It's kind of ripe for the bug bounty hunting or the security researcher to come through. If you're doing a pen test, it's technically in scope, because if somebody's giving you a single URL or a single IP address, it's definitely in scope. Go ahead and attack it, If you're doing a pen test, it's in the SAL, go for it. And basically, just always kind of, wow, I'm running really fast, I'm sorry. I can talk slower if I want. So basically, tips for defense is, if you don't need it, turn it off. Again, make sure your WAF vendor actually supports HTTP2. If they don't, turn it off. And again, no, really, just don't use it. So that's pretty much what I got. And then I've got a list of resources. These are all pretty good about using it to test HTTP2S. Some of the RFCs, which are really interesting reads, most people don't follow them. They have tons and tons and tons of awesome security configurations that nobody ever reads. And, developers like to build tools to do things like load balancing and things like that, which actually come in handy with security testing. So it's always good to keep up with if people are developing tools or scripts or whatnot. Especially if you're pen testing, they're really good to, kind of have handy and check out because, like I said, free tools or things that people build out are generally pretty fun to have and anything else. Like I said, I talked really fast and I apologize. But did any of y'all have any questions or comments or conversation topics that you guys want to talk about? Quick is fun. Especially there's quite a few things where people have been using Quick to tunnel out as opposed to DNS. There's a couple talks out there that I'm quite familiar with, and that's kind of how I got this, was from talking to one of those researchers. And so yeah, I've worked with Quick. It's really interesting. The fact that it works over UDP as opposed to TCP, and also the other thing is H3 is coming out and it's all UDP. So that's going to make all our worlds that much more interesting, not knowing it. But yeah, Quick is interesting. It's a really cool new attack vector on top of it. Like I said, if you're trying to tunnel out data, IR teams aren't looking for it, and all of that. So if you can get on that port, you can encapsulate a lot of HTTP2 traffic via Quick and exfoliate a lot of data out that way. So, does that answer your question? What do you got? Yeah. For the most part, I mean, and I'm sure you probably know this, like most IR teams are getting the fire hose anyway. And when you're watching the traffic and they're relying a lot on more traditional WAF methods to go ahead and pull the logs, because they're using like something like elk stack or something like that, so they're taking the logs from the WAF and they're relying very heavily on that, and then on top of that, yeah, that's all they're gonna see is binary. It's just like any other TLS or SSL solution. They're not gonna see what you're sending. They're just gonna see that unless they're using, one of those fun products that decrypts everything and looks at it and then re-encrypts it, because that's totally secure. But, yeah, I mean, most people aren't looking for it. It's encrypted. So really, unless they're decrypting every single, connection attempt or anything like that, you're not going to see it. So that's what makes it more fun too. You get two. So basically the first part is with ALPN. So most TLS connections come down to, it's definitely a client-server connection, and it depends on, if you run a tool like SSL scan, you'll go through it and it'll always tell you at the end, this is my preferred connection method, and it'll give you, TLS version, and it'll give you, it'll give you protocol and cipher, right? So you'll always see that. So this would be the same exact thing, only ALPN is just basically saying I'm using H2. So let's upgrade that particular protocol, and then after that, then it comes down to what's configured as the preferred protocol through the connection from the client and the server. So they'll no. It's so it'll connect. So it's basically looking at protocol, and then it'll look at cipher and protocol through TLS or SSL. That's something I'm working on. I didn't really have a really wonderful POC, so I didn't feel comfortable with that. But this is kind of a living project for me. Last year was a lot of research into what it is, how it works, so on and so forth. And now we're looking at how to manipulate it and how to, attack things and things like that. So, again, there's research out there where people are encapsulating data through QUIC and through HTTP2. There's not a lot of people working on either of these really. And again, that's why I'm like, more people need to research this and get on board. But if you're interested in researching this, definitely let me know. So, more hands is better. All right. Anybody else have any questions, comments, death threats, throwing things? Man. Oh, sorry. How what? Did you guys like that? Was I the worst person? I probably could have trolled you guys harder. But I mean, basically to have Joe Gray pull me aside and tell me F you was probably the greatest victory of NolaCon 2019 for me. So, and just so you know, it's a 2019 Subaru Crosstrek. No. I do not request random requests on MySpace. I'm sorry. You're welcome. Nice. Hold on. All right. Well, if you guys have any questions or whatnot, again, you can hit me up. My DMs are open, security_panda. You can send me questions or, like I said, death threats. If you have anything you need to know, definitely give me an email. This is an open living project. Like I said, the more hands, the better. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, I'll get these slides published pretty soon. I gotta present again next weekend. And then after that, I'll publish this. I know there's a lot of technical junk in there, so. All right. Well, thanks for suffering through this with me. Yeah.